rich people, the 1%. Everyone loves the 1%, right? Guess where they all are, and it's the fastest place that they're growing? Yeah, Washington, D.C. That's right. Let's look at some facts about the growing population of rich people in D.C. During the past decade, the region added 21,000 households in the nation's top 1%. No other metro area came even close. Companies spent about $3.5 billion annually on lobbying at the end of the last decade, a nearly 90% increase from 1999. And of course, all the lobbyists work, and most of them live in the DC area. So before we get to the nitty-gritty of this, should this surprise anybody with everything going on in the country that the 1% is that it's growing, but not only is it growing, it's growing, of course, in Washington, D.C.?
No, I mean, money is the thing there. I mean, it has been, especially the last 20 years. And I think the thing I found most fascinating about this was that they were talking about, because of the government investment in the region and the stimulus package, that this wealth has come there. So I'm like, so government investment actually works. So it's weird.
So it works in that
government context, right?
Right. So it works for the government people.
Right. Yes, and it works in general. You know, it creates jobs, and it's created a lot of jobs. It's just the jobs that are there a little frightening.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's interesting because, you know, Washington has always been about power rather than money, and this article was so interesting, and it was kind of a lengthy article, and I encourage everyone to read it because it's just so interesting, showing how the money, especially after 9/11, we allotted a lot of money towards everything, whether it be security, beefing up government, just anything in the government we wanted to do. We kind of said, okay, like, just keep us safe. Yep. So all this money got poured in, and then in turn you have what used to be it being about power and control in the government. You have younger people, you have smarter people, more educated people going to Washington and working for these firms. And it's interesting because if you lived in DC, I remember when my sister went to school there. She, after graduated, and worked for a consulting firm. And the whole thing was, if you worked on K Street, that was where all the money was. Yeah. And outside of that, you were a government employee. Right. And you made a decent but modest wage, and you weren't flashy. There certainly wasn't like a Tesla dealership like there is now in Washington, D.C.
Or the most successful Tiffany store.
Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting to see the shift in Washington. I feel like there's also a cultural shift in mirroring, or maybe it's chicken or egg, kind of what's going on with America, where the power is now through money, through showing you have money, through showing you can buy something. But
yeah. Well, speaking of how power is through money, so let's look at some numbers about the 1% and how money breaks down in general. I'm really fascinated by this. So if you're in the top 1%, you make roughly $380,000 a year. I think when people think of the 1%, they think that means like you're billions. Like Mr. Burns, billions. But
that's
300.
Not a lot of money, actually. I'm shocked by that.
No, it's not. And then you can see the rest of the numbers there. But top 10%, you're making around $113,000, which if you live in a metro area in New York or in California or even in DC, that's really not that much money. And then you're in the top 50% if you make $33,000. I don't even want to tell you what percentage I'm in because we'll all cry. But
it still shows you the disparity, though. The income disparity is still huge. Even if, you know, $380,000 doesn't seem like a lot to get into the 1%, from there the sky's the limit. The other people in the 1% might also have $3 billion, and those people are not even in the same world of what they can afford, what they can do with their money, and turning it into wealth. And then the people making $33,000, you know, they can't even put food in their mouths. Right. And that's the majority of the country.
So to that point, should we be talking about something different than the 1%? Because if we're talking about the 1%, of course $300-something thousand is a nice amount of money, and you can live a nice.
You're not influencing politicians.
You're not influencing politicians. No. You're not even really. You can live a wealthy life. I don't begrudge anyone that has wealth. That's great. But shouldn't we be talking? Shouldn't there be some other number that we talk about? Like if you make over $5 million,
or 0.001%. I mean, I've heard that term bandied about.
Which probably means you make, let's say, $1 million. I have no idea. But
you know what? I think the 1% is important in Washington, D.C. is what they're trying to show is that Washington, D.C. and the amount of people and the amount of money they're pouring into it is kind of turning Washington into the new Hollywood. So basically, they're recruiting people that are going to now be, you know, people that make the $300,000. Now, they're not individually influencing Washington. Instead, they have about 20 of them or 50 of these people making $300,000 working at one firm, and collectively, they're now putting in enough money. They're encouraging different businesses to put 26 billion or million or whatever it is into influencing Washington. And one thing in the story that was important to look at was that one woman who was talking about how she was recruited to explain to companies to how to show them how to make the to get deregulation of handling hazardous waste, to get Congress to deregulate that so a company can make more money.
Right.
She only makes $300,000 a year, but she just influenced cuts up to
policy.
billions of dollars in cuts for policies for companies.
And then it completely affects everyone in America because toxic waste is not being handled properly. So
Is this also proof that the Republicans and the Democrats are just the same freaking thing? Because we have a Democratic administration right now, so you'd think that that's more for the people, but what we're seeing is actually the 1% keep growing and everybody.
Because I think everyone signed on for a while that corporate money is the engine of our economy, and that's it. And it happened when Clinton, when he cut the welfare state and he made a big deal with communications corporations. The Communications Act completely deregulated media, which is created what we have now in media, which is a bunch of bullshit.
Yes, that's a different story altogether.
And so, when Clinton came around toward the middle, that's what it is. That is, America is capitalism. It is about big business, and that is the business in government these days. But the other aspect of the story that freaked me out a little bit was that a lot of the money coming in is due to the security contractors, because that went, exploded after 9/11. So now it's kind of a Silicon Valley innovation kind of place. But the innovation all is around security and privacy issues and and all the cyber stuff, and that freaks me out because the more money that's invested in that, more people are invested in keeping the money there, keeping these security policies in place.
Right, and it's like the industrial war complex. We need a war every now and again so that they can keep the money going.
But did you see what's interesting is that the war is kind of internal now and on us because they were showing that defense contract spending has gone way down and like you're saying, the IT spending is going way up. So now rather than it being beneficial to us to wage war in the Middle East or somewhere else, it's beneficial to wage war against your own citizens and monitor them. Because like you were saying, now we have to keep all these people employed and now we have to justify their employment. So forget sending people overseas, building ships, bombs, submarine, forget that technology. Now it's all about spy technology and the NSA.
Yeah, just spying us. Well, we're going to get to that in the story later. So one more number I want to throw out at you guys and then one last question. So the top 1% rose 19.6% last year compared with a 1% increase for the remaining 99%. So that sort of tells you that the game is stacked against us. You know what this was reminding me of? My favorite bit that your father did about how there's a club and we're not in it. And we're going to post a link to the article that we got this from, and I'll post a link to the clip from your dad. But that's what was making me feel like there is just this thing out there, this giant money thing.
It's overwhelming too. If you really think about it and think of it in terms of a club that you can't get in, you start to think, well, screw it. Like, what can I do to make a difference? How can I change this? This is just the machine, and it's part of it.
It creates despair.
And if I'm not in the club, I'm never going to be. So I might as well just put my head down and work and get the little piece of pie that I can.
So that was my last question then. Then what do you suppose? How do you take a story like this and then feel okay about it beyond just putting your head down and?
I mean, it is. It does create a despair inside of the average person in this country. But I think also, you look at the Occupy Wall Street movement, and the one thing that they did do is they did create this conversation that we're having right now about the 1%. So there is an awareness, at least in the consciousness of citizens, whether the average person feels they can do anything about it, maybe not. But there are people who feel compelled and really do live to fight the system, and so there is a conversation going on some level, and it fills me with a bit of despair. It does. It's like, how are we supposed to fight against this?
A really good way to fight against this is exactly what you said, though. Like, people say Occupy Wall Street was a failure or it disappeared, but it's made the 1%. Now, the term the 1% existed before, but not. It wasn't such a mainstream term. Everyone uses it.
Wasn't being had.
It's used as a noun, as a verb. It's just everyone understands what the 1% is, where the average American definitely did not understand that there was 1%. They didn't understand the term or how to apply it. So I think in the end, when you're asking how you fight it, it's just information. It's like when you were talking about deregulation of media. Most people hear deregulation and think, well, that's great, and that really depends on your end game and how you think about stuff. But people don't understand that also means that corporations are able to come in and tell you what information you're getting. So it's really about it's personal responsibility and keeping yourself informed. And I think that's the way to avoid despair, is by saying, I'm going to take personal responsibility.
Wow, Jenn Hoffman bringing this to a place that I feel slightly empowered. You know what? As Guy Fawkes said in V for Vendetta, you can kill a man, but not an idea. So use that for something.